Unbelievable scenes. How's it going?
Unbelievable scenes. How are we? We're good, thank you. Yeah. What's been going on? Christmas,
Yeah,
New Year. Not too relaxing.
not much sleep.
Uh, we got some sleep, but just busy with juggling two little ones, to be
Yeah,
honest.
how is
So,
that? How's the level up from 1 to 2?
um, it makes one seem a piece of piss.
Oh, really?
Just because if between like juggling one person between two of you do end up with a bit of time to yourself, but when you got
Yeah,
two, it's one each, so you don't have quite as much time to yourself. So, but all good fun. Not
amazing.
complaining. It's just it is what it is. So, how about you?
Yeah, all good, all good. To be fair, I worked through Christmas.
Did you?
Um, it's never like too intense, but there's like
Okay.
stuff that needs doing before the
Do,
financial year ends, basically.
I was going to say, is that like you have to do that for work, or is that kind of optional? Do you know what I mean?
You could take it all off if you wanted to, but
It
then
bite
either
you in the
other people
nose.
have to cover your stuff, and
Yeah.
I don't personally think it's not a full day of work. It's a little bit. I
Yeah.
think you can use it better elsewhere, being abroad, that sort of thing.
That makes more sense.
Um, but I think, yeah, to be fair, next week is when things will return to some normality. So it's still been, yeah, a bit weird the last couple of
Yeah.
days.
Yeah. What did you get up to? Because it was your birthday just before Christmas as well, wasn't it? You
Yes,
got to go to
yeah,
Dublin.
yeah, great city. Yeah, so we're in
Unreal city.
Dublin, and then it's just got everything. I think just people are great. It's like London, but not full of
Wankers.
arseholes. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it
See,
was really good. It's really good.
because I went there for my seg do like years ago, and it was fucking sick. But I'd love to go like actually as a bit more of a trip and just to
Yeah.
see it a little bit more. Do you know what
Didn't
I
you come
mean?
back and do an open workout like 2 days
Yeah,
after?
I
Yeah.
did. Yeah, did all right as well, to be fair.
Obviously. Yeah, no, it's great. It's a great place. And it was very Christmassy. And then, yeah, quite low key Christmas and New Year pub quiz, getting into pub quizzing quite a lot.
I,
So,
I
yeah,
feel I've seen that,
yeah,
mate. I
it's
feel
good.
like you're one of the few people, or that I feel like actually has hobbies outside of CrossFit.
I, it's a good question, actually. I feel like they're limited, but
Because you
there's a
you
bit of
you
balance.
you go and watch the footy and stuff as well. Do you know what I mean?
I would say the main outside of, spending time with Liv, going for coffee, going out to eat, that sort of thing, it's probably CrossFit one,
Hmm.
chess two,
Chess online or in
online.
person?
Well, a
Okay.
bit of both, but online is more
Okay.
frequent, definitely. And then Stoke, I would say.
Yeah.
But that's probably it. And I would say that's also limited to, I feel like my going out days are, you know, once every 2 months, once every 3 months. There's a lot of, to balance it all out, I probably do nothing outside of that.
Yeah. That I feel like for me now, if I was going to the football, I would probably class that as going out now. Do you know? Do you know? Which is it's pretty pathetic, isn't it, really?
Yeah, it's been an interesting year. My dad's just retired, so I mean we've
Okay.
always gone. But I mean we haven't had season tickets since we were like, I don't know, 13, 14 glory years. But since he's retired, he's been going to pretty much everything.
Ideal.
And there's a decent, feels like there might be a bit of a resurgence this year after 6 years of just dire.
I thought Tony Pulis was coming back. I did.
25-1, I would have taken him. I really would have taken him. People got sick and people got greedy, and look what happened.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. People, yeah, people don't, grass isn't greener. Let's put it that
Exactly.
way. Yeah.
Exactly. It got too big, and then you always think it'll never happen to your club, and then 10 years
It
later it
does.
has. Yeah,
It
literally. It
does.
happened to everyone.
Look at Blackburn Rovers. That was my team. We're flying high,
Doing
win
all
the
right at the moment.
Premiership. We are. We're in the playoffs, aren't we? So, I mean,
John Eustace, who I also thought would come to Stoke at some point, or come
yeah.
come back to Stoke, I suppose. But yeah, I think it's a nicer balance probably now than it has been in the past.
Okay.
But
In
I'm
what
not
se- In what sense?
I think early on, I feel like everybody must struggle. So when I first joined in like 20, I think it's 2020, like October, November 2020. So it's been a couple of years now, which is crazy. You're sort of seeing all this volume and you're like, I've got to do absolutely everything every single day. And what you're sort of at the time, what I wasn't thinking was, oh, well, actually, I'm working, 40 to 60 hours a week.
Yeah.
And I do, the odd two a day, but it's
It's
not
not a
common.
lot.
And I remember comparing it to Ed at the time as a student, and you're like, why are you making comparisons against these
Yeah, well,
people that
yeah.
are this level? And just out of think of being naturally competitive and seeing it on the paper, you're like, oh, I'm going to get everything done. If I miss it, then it's a 4-hour session on a Saturday. And I think quickly your body realizes that one, you're not capable of doing that. And two,
Mhm.
it has to be priority 3 behind home,
Work,
work
misses. Yeah.
3. Oh my God, so cute.
Just busted in. That was like perfect timing for that part of the conversation we were in then. How old are you now?
30.
Are you 30 now? So that was big 3-0 this, right?
It
Okay.
was, yeah, which was the excuse for like 7 pints, which was definitely more than enough now, which looking back to uni is absolutely tragic. But now I was like, it's a good milestone, I'll accept it. So I
Um,
think yeah, I'm at peace with what is obviously ramp it up. Like if it's Marbella coming up, or I might do Sid this year, to be fair. But I'm really enjoying team competitions a lot more, I think, than I ever have individual.
okay. Okay.
Um, so that, don't be wrong, that's 100% more of that's a 2 a day, and will turn the dial up as
Yeah.
the post is. Um, but I think as long as I'm doing what I need to, I know I'll
Mhm.
get better anyway, because that's just the quality of the programming. Like it's just facts. If you see this phase out, you will see the return of it.
Yeah.
But not getting, if I couldn't do, oh, well, you've missed the 1 hour zone too. I'm like, so be it. I'm not
Don't worry about
a
it.
professional athlete. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
But I do think that's a big one early on of people being like, I'm going to do absolutely everything. And it's like,
No,
now I
you
know,
don't
I'm
need
like,
to.
you don't need to. You're right.
You better just be consistent with like less things. So like pick the bare minimum you want to get done. And then if you can check those bits off and they keep progressing, like great.
That's
Any
it.
more than that's bonus.
And I think I also now sort of accept that people will progress at different rates as well
Yeah.
because of the time or the intensity that they're able to invest into it. And I think
Mm.
early on, if you sort of join, because I think at the time I was probably too bad really to join. And I think in the years since, everything's got more inclusive in a positive way. But I feel like at the
Mm.
time when I joined, I was the shittest person by like quite a significant distance. Which has changed, I think, over the years, because there's been a wider branch out, and when you started option A, B, C, that sort of stuff, which is
Yeah.
amazing. Um, but it was just too attractive not to at the time, regardless of
Okay.
where I was.
Yeah. There's two things I want to pick on what you just said. There's the dial that
Yeah,
you mentioned. Like sometimes, if you got Marbella coming up or whatever comp it is, like you've got to learn to have that dial. And if you want to go a bit more all in, for a 6 week period or whatever it is,
yeah,
like
absolutely.
then ramp it up. That's probably and for us guys that pretty much work full time, like that's sustainable. Doing it hard for 6 weeks
Yes,
and
because
then chill
people
out after that.
know, and also sort of, it's an accepted thing at work. If I'm a bit like, well, I'm not coming down for 3 days in London this week, or I'm not staying over. I'm
Yeah,
sort of at the stage now where I'm long enough into this journey that people also accept it. It's not like, oh, where are you going? It's, oh no,
yeah,
it's,
yeah, yeah. I
it's
get you.
sort of CrossFit. And I do really enjoy that sort of period. But I suppose a lot of it is building up to the competition, because obviously you want to be peaking for it. And I think from a team perspective, there's other people that you don't want to let down. You want to sort of,
Of course.
you never want I finished a workout and it's like, well, I didn't run at all for that block and it's cost me here, sort of thing.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I think I sort of know now that unless I cut a lot of other things out, which I either can't or I'm not prepared to,
Yeah.
you can't live in that, you know, 10 sessions a week plus 3 hours a day
It's
in the
true.
gym.
It's true. I do feel like more, maybe this is my skewed perception now, but I do feel like more people maybe do realize that. because I think for like back in the day, like we had a full group of like 10 people coming in the gym, like doing AM conditioning, two sessions a day, coming back after work later on.
Yeah.
But I guess it's kind of your environment and just what drags you along there actually as well. And how many, I mean, so there's two things I want to come back to here. With when you said it was like too attractive not to jump on JST,
Yeah.
like what were you kind of doing before that? And then I kind of guess lead into now, like have you been training solo since that point? Like just doing the competitive stuff, or are you training with other people? So yeah, like 2020 to now.
So it was in lockdown, but at the time, so
Okay.
this is still in the same company, but I was at a job which was a lot of driving and traveling. So I was
Right.
never in one place. And I'd sort of got sick of his 30-minute AMRAP of just sort of ending your life in pure gym every single day, 5 days a week, which I think is
Yeah,
a natural stage of the cycle. And I
that's
still
true.
see it now. Um, and I think at the time it was, well, I'd like to, wherever I am, I'd like to know exactly what I can do and sort of stop wasting elements of time and start
Yeah,
genuinely progressing.
yeah.
And I just remember at the time, the sort of the total package just, I think still is, but at the time it's just, it's an unrivaled scale. And I still think ridiculous now that, I can message you or Jamie or Steve or who, Ed, and just be like, oh, what do you think about this? Or, oh, what percentage would you hit on this? Or why is this looking like that? Which still relevant now, obviously better now than I was, but for 2020, me was a ridiculous resource to
Yeah,
have.
yeah.
Um, and then obviously that ramped up into all the sort of in-person stuff, which I still think is one of the best bits because atmospherically it's so good. And I also think I've said this to people over the years, but nobody ever treated you any differently for just being someone who does an hour and a half a day, 5 days a week and loves
Mhm.
it versus people that are, knocking on the door of going to the games or have been to the games or regional semi-finals, whatever it is at the time.
Yeah.
So that was another big thing. And then, yeah, to be honest, I've trained on my own pretty much the entire time. Obviously, go and see people. Like, it's obviously a good group at Solihull very occasionally, but for the most part,
Okay.
yes, I would say 98% of my training has been solo.
I mean, how, because most people will probably be like, or a lot of people will be like, just doing it on your own. Like, how how you stay motivated there? Do you know, like, what is it? Because we had a conversation before Christmas, like the core team, and we were kind of like saying, who who are our like main competitors? Is it HWPO or is it Proven
Yeah,
or is it like the class? Is it a gym's class?
it's a good question.
Do you know what I mean? Because you could easily be like, actually, I've had enough of training on my own. Do you go back to a group setting? Do you know what I mean? Um, I don't know.
I think part of it is I genuinely just fucking love
I bet.
training. Um, as in, it's something I look forward to doing every single day. And I think
Yeah.
as, if I'm ill, as Liv, my girlfriend, will testify, if I can't go to the gym, it's, quite a big mood impactor, definitely. Um, Although I think a big learning early on actually was if you've had a super stressful day at work, the antidote isn't a super stressful day in the
You don't
gym.
count.
Because I'd always sort of thought they're two different stresses. Like one's like work stress and one's, fun stress. But actually, I remember talking to you and Steve about, the concept of the bath and the taps. And it's because
Yeah.
again, it was tied to that volume early on. Um, I can see how I think maybe if you were a level above me and you were into this 10 plus sessions a day and something crept in that was a bit like, oh, I don't really want to do this, or
Hmm.
I could stay at home. But I think unless I am unwell, I don't really have that feeling, as in,
Yeah.
that motivation. And I know if there's something inside me which is like, I don't actually want to do that, I'm a bit like, well, it's the precursor to, being ill or something else is going on.
Yeah.
Um, I've definitely
What?
seen the benefits of training with people, I think, and it's fun. But I think to be able to have my own sort of schedule around work and
Yeah.
not having to struggle with the motivation side of stuff, I never had a problem with it.
Why why is it that you fucking love training?
It's not something I've reflected on massively. I just think it's different to everything else in life, I would say. I
Hmm.
think it's the enjoyment of the process as well as a positive, which I've never really had a problem with. Like obviously the dream part is you're at the end of the block and here's your big max
PB.
out
Yeah.
PB, you know. Um, but I think it's just been a part of my life for so long in different formats that it's just something I sort of require, and
Yeah.
it's the main thing I've done for forever. Um,
It
and
is the
yeah,
pro
I think it's that. I think
it
it's
is
the
the
process.
yeah, it is. And you've mentioned it a few times as well, and especially like that lockdown example where, you know, GST is like progress driven. Like if you've got like a Mayhem scale, you know, Mayhem's here, and then you got JST on this side where it's like right, a bit more like very CrossFit-esque,
Yeah,
and this is like we're a bit more for that more principle based, like with all the progressions and all that sort of stuff. Like we do that because we just fucking love the progress and the process of it all. Do you know what I mean? That's like why we do it that way.
and
Because
I think you can in a block, you can settle into a nice routine in certain elements where you're like, oh, I'm going to row on this day, and so you can sort of plan for that and know that that's coming up. But there's obviously enough CrossFit Tuesdays at the moment. There's enough variety there that there may be a familiar structure of this is going to hurt in one and then slightly more in two, and then three is, hold on or whatever it's going to be. So it's
yeah,
familiar enough that you're not being, too shocked by anything, but there's enough variety that I think it's always super interesting. And I've never found any sort of elements of routine or sort of boredom creeping in. It's been, quite a long time at this point.
yeah, of course. How long have you been training now? Like before CrossFit as well?
I was looking back, I think I did my first CrossFit workout in 2013.
Okay.
So
So okay.
I was at a Muay Thai camp in Thailand on my hashtag gap year. And it was the S&C, but this was back in the sort of paleo. I remember one of the coaches
Of
doing
course.
proper genuine paleo days. So I did
Eating nuts.
my first mirth then, but that was a sort of, S&C
Yeah.
contributor.
Yeah.
And then after that, I suppose you went to the sort of classic hashtag Pure Gym, Redditch, Nando's, arms 3 times a week. But I'd always run as well because I'd always have sort of one eye on joining the Marines, which was obviously my
Mhm.
focus for years and years and years. Um, and then the training for that became much less CrossFit. Still quite body weight based, but not too CrossFitty.
Yeah.
Then the sort of the 9 months I was in that was, I mean, yeah, it's a very unique way of training because it's just 100% permanently for the entire
Yeah.
time.
All the time.
I sort of reflect back and think, how is it possible to sort of be running intervals at 100% or what
Hmm.
seemed like 100% for sort of 10 in a row when after one you were absolutely fucked. So
Fucked.
it's an amazing place. But I wasn't that good at it and it wasn't for me. And then after that, I think is probably when I started focusing on big metcons because there was an element of you're getting sort of thrashed doing that every single day and you got so unbelievably aerobically fit, like,
Hmm.
climbing ropes, running with weight, that sort of stuff, that I needed that element to stay in the real world.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think then that naturally evolved into this sort of concept of being a bit good at everything.
Yeah. A jack of all trades. What when you
Exactly.
when you first started CrossFit,
Yeah.
what what was the first competition that you did? Can you remember?
Yeah, I did a form pairs competition at Form
Okay.
in Leeds,
Yeah. Yeah.
which had the most ridiculous max out ever, which was 1 RMDT, 1 round of DT.
Okay.
And you had a 3 minute
Okay.
window to both of you hit that. And obviously, because it was so long, you basically had one attempt.
Yeah. Okay.
Um, and it was with a great bloke called Rob Dent, who's up at the Shy Fit, one of the Shy Fits that we had that
Yeah.
class
The one
day
in
at.
Leeds. Yeah.
I think we came fourth, and I spent most of the day outside, sort of shaking and shivering because I hadn't eaten anything. And it
Mm.
was, I normally train after work, and it was a classic, my first ever like 7 a.m., competition start. But it was a good learning curve, really good learning curve. After that, local one at Vorto with Mitch, who I think is now back on JST.
Yeah, and Hickenbottom.
Yeah, great guy.
Yeah, great guy.
Then Sid not last year, year before was my first big individual one.
Okay.
Did Marbella that year as well, and then Team Marbella for the last 2 years. But I only did 2 comps last year because I decided to do slightly less just for
Okay.
2024, which is a good move actually.
Reason.
I feel like post comp and the build up, it was taking a lot out of me,
Okay. Yeah.
even at a scale / intermediate sort of level.
Mm-hmm.
But I think this year, going back to Marbella may be excessive because I think it would be number 4, but it's a great trip, obviously.
I feel like you end up being like JST social sec for that trip every year.
It's a great trip. It is a bloody good trip. And I think you get the alumni as well, for want of a better word, that are still attached to the group and want to see everybody, and the chat's
Yeah.
there. And there's some amazing gym communities, like, some of the extra ones that are out there in massive numbers. It's a great trip.
Is that
Sid,
your favorite? Is Marbella your favorite?
I think it is
Yeah.
because beach, swim, unique, it's always got a run, which is always my best finish of any event.
Okay.
Um, yeah, I think it has to be. I mean, it's an arena, it's a beach, it's mountains, it's outside,
It
the
does
weather's
look unreal.
good. It makes you
It
feel, much more professional than you are, which I think is excellent.
it's what you want, the experience. Yeah, yeah.
Exactly, exactly. And then if you stay for a couple of days as well, you get everything.
Top it all off.
But I think Sid being, 20 minutes away in Birmingham,
Ideal.
that was a big, I think as an individual, that's probably the best one I've done, purely because my bay has evolved over the years
Right,
into
okay.
being a much more complete experience.
Yeah.
And I'd be tempted to do that team just out of, closeness. I think I probably need to do a graft one this year, just
Just to
based off
see.
how good they all are and how,
Mm.
the sort of the reputation of them all. But I do think a 2 or 3 day now is preferable to,
One
six,
day.
six events in one day, 20 minutes between events, just destroying yourself.
Yeah. That's the thing about a graft event, isn't it? It just tends to be one day, whereas, instead you get the games experience in inverted commas, don't you? The 2 days, the 3 days, which there's just it's different, isn't it? Because High Rocks is massive now and that's just an hour or an hour and a half. Do you know what? So
Someone at work has said, do you want to do pairs high rocks? And I will
do one.
run a bit first because, I mean,
That's your jam.
20 kilos in the past, I was a pretty serious runner.
Hmm.
And I still, I can still like Sid top 10-ish, top 12 a run just based off being still an okay runner. But it would be nice to do a genuine,
Like decent effort on it.
sit around a 40-minute 10K, 41, 42-minute 10K, and then get into it.
That'd be some going that.
But it's a lot of, I think like with running, you can't, my feeling is you could do as many rowing or assault bike intervals as you want, but if you want to get better at running, you just have to run. I just don't think there's any carryover with it.
Yeah.
But I'd like to do it, and I'm not against high rocks. I know it's, trendy to put shit wall ball videos up and you can laugh at it because that is super poor. And I think it's inferior because
I think it's just another like benchmark workout, isn't it really?
but doing it it's like, imagine you play football, you play the same match of football every single week.
Yeah, I know.
It's just
It's
that's
one
why
of
I
the
can't. I think it's a I went the Cry Rocks one last year, and you're like, as a test, this is a good test
and
as a one off.
it's been interesting. I've started to see that word crop up here and there a little
Oh
bit more, and I'm
really?
like, I should have trademarked this shit earlier on in the year.
Wigan HQ Cry Rocks TM.
Um, but so if you had the choice of like that one day or the
Mm,
couple of days, you're going for the couple of days experience.
I think it's a better experience. I'm not a great recoverer. I would
Okay.
probably say, like, if it's a one day, I do not want to eat. And I'll sort
Mm,
of be of the early on, I'll be of the mindset of, I know when the fucking buzzer goes, I'll be absolutely fine because you'll forget about it. But in the long
yeah.
term, that's not a healthy sort of sustainable
It's
way of
not.
doing it. Whereas with particularly with a team over like 3 days and people are making food and you can actually relax and go to the supermarket and,
Yeah.
prepare, I feel like better. You're still
Yeah.
getting 8 different things in and you're still having that horrendous 30 minutes before where you're like, why have I signed up for this? I actually hate this. But I think it's an infinitely better experience.
Yeah. 5 years with JST now.
Yeah,
How,
crazy.
how like I know you briefly mentioned before, like
Mm.
why you joined. How do you feel like we've evolved since then? And I mean, like, completely honest. So, what do you feel like has changed in those 5 years?
I think it feels like the scale up and the experience is more complete,
Okay.
definitely over the time. I think in the early days, the information was there, but not as readily available as it is now.
Mm,
Like I feel like the Instagram sort of, scrolling post would be the big option. But I think now with there's so much content on Circle
there
and
is a
just,
lot.
lurking in any of the different sort of subsettings is the answer to people's question. And I assume people pop up with similar questions like,
Yeah.
cyclically as they join. But there's so like the nutrition stuff on there is, so good. And the 5K row next week,
Hmm.
people the information that you could sit down for 2 hours before that and
Yeah.
go through
Go
absolutely
through.
everything and strategize it to that level if you want to,
Mm,
which I think is pretty unparalleled. I think the community and the frequency of sort of community meetups has obviously improved. I mean, there's people I didn't know when I started JST, and like I'm going to their wedding this year, for example. So it
that
it
Rob's.
does become, yeah, it does
Yeah.
become that sort of. Even though you see these people maybe 5, 6 times a year, there's
Yeah.
that such a strong community, and I think it's obviously such a shared experience that you can build really close relationships with people.
Mm,
And I think as well, I feel like early on there was the pedigree of what you and Steve and that sort of team had achieved,
yeah.
but I feel like that has also, I think that remained the pinnacle in terms of
Yeah.
like absolute, but I think this almost like the saturation of people at the top of the UK has only increased
Yeah. I get
over
you.
these 5 years. Like I do think at a big competition, you struggle to see someone not in purple or orange on the top of the podium. And I think there's constantly people coming through, like Tom Owen's team in Marbella, winning RX. And obviously, you didn't know some of the people in that team before. Obviously, you see people on the leaderboard and that sort of stuff. But then when you get dropped into that sort of level and win it by an absolute distance and people are going, well, why didn't you go in elite? You're like, how many more of these people are sort of lurking on the leaderboard that are genuinely on this journey
Yeah, as
to that
well.
level?
Yeah. Yeah. It's it's interesting because I feel like without a conversation like this,
Yeah.
I feel like it's very easy for me to not appreciate things like that as much as probably what I should, because I'm always like, well, I feel like we should be doing this better, and I feel like we should be doing this better, and what about just like tweaking and
Which is the right
improving this?
approach, 100%. But you're right. You need to sort of example. The direct example is the tracking stuff on Fitter. Like if I've had a
Mm,
pretty average session, or I feel like I've been stuck on a sort of similar number for a long sort of period of time, you can just instantly go and look at that graph and be like, oh, hang on a minute.
yeah,
Look all the way back to the start, and then you get sort of blind to that the length of
you
that
do.
progress. I feel like because everyone is always like, well, this is my new standard, and where are we going from here? What's next?
Yeah, yeah. It's good that, Max, because I'm being honest, like I do actually forget some of that stuff
Yeah,
sometimes.
I think it's inevitable because and also you're so caught up in one, what's going on, and two, what's new that I think you do occasionally need to be like, you know, go back and have a look at the 2020, 2021 Instagram post compared to now in terms of what people are achieving. I think you've got at least two people who you'd expect to be in the top 10 of semis next year, provided they compete. You've
Yeah,
got a pretty strong sort of team development pathway. There's these freakish 14-year-old people that are cleaning as much slash more than me, which is like the genuine long-term pathway. I don't remember any of that youth stuff. I feel like that's last 2 years.
That's brand new. That's
Exactly.
yeah, that's taken from like any other sport would have some sort of pathway. So it's
Yeah, you're
like,
right.
there's plenty of kids that don't have any direction or don't have that in this sport, in this space that we're in. Like, let's give it to them.
And I think as well, based on getting it slightly wrong, you can see people that would have been, the fittest person in the world just being by like 22, 23, like, do you know what? I've had enough. And you can see why, because, experiencing that level of intensity and volume for one day is quite overwhelming. But, doing that the entire time throughout all year 15, 16, 17, all that time is a tough ask.
There's there's a difference as well. So when we're getting together those like juniors, there's a difference between them training with people the same age
Yeah.
and training with adults. I feel like, maybe your Haley Adams and other people like that, like they're probably spending most of the time around adults. So it kind of like
Yeah.
probably makes you grow up like almost a bit too soon. Because Emma Carey like retired. She's like early 20s
Yeah, I
and
saw
stuff.
that. I
It's
mean, I think
like,
how I feel about certain religions in CrossFit in a very vocal way, but I think what she was saying was obviously like very an honourable way of looking at
yeah,
stuff. But you're right.
yeah.
I mean, you don't see Neymar age 21, 22 just being like,
You don't.
see you
You
later.
don't.
But you're
Um,
right. They've trained with people their age, that entire youth system, all the way
yeah,
up until adults.
and it kind of, and I was chatting to Pete just before this, and he was like saying that you kind of have you end up with like a bit more of like a fun rapport with like people that age because they're like dead giddy to train and stuff like that. Do you know what I mean? And
Yeah,
like a few of them have started to buy like Lego for each other to build when they go into like the next training camp and stuff.
love that.
Um, it's probably some stuff that you or I will probably. I mean, we might do. I'm not that into Lego, but we might buy each other Lego. Do you know what I mean? But we're probably not
Yeah.
gonna. Yeah. So yeah, it's been amazing to see the connections built off the back of that, and equally on the parent side, like some of the parents are just absolutely buzzing to be there, and they email you after the weekend like, "Oh my God, that was like such a good weekend." It's kind of strange. It's good, but it's a little strange as well.
Well,
But
I think
yeah.
there's probably two things to it. Is one, say someone started in the gym age 10 because one of their parents does it or someone in the family, and
Hmm.
then presumably that kid has suddenly got much better than, the
Of
parent
course.
or whoever they were training with in the gym. So it must be nice to be able to sort of hand that responsibility over to people that can run it.
Look after it.
And then two, I suppose it's people who it's maybe presumably quite an isolating thing to be unbelievably good at CrossFit at the age of 13, 14, or 15, because I
When
don't
you're
know
in your own
how
gym with
many
no
of your
one
mates are
else.
doing it exactly.
True.
So to be
Yeah.
able to sort of,
Create
people that
that's
have got
been
all
really
that
good.
shared experience is
Yeah.
super positive.
Yeah. Agreed. Yeah. And to be honest, that's so from when I was younger and when I was sailing,
Yeah,
like I just remember having an unbelievable time with other people who like were just having a really good time as well and a good crack, messing about a little bit,
yeah,
sailing and competing like at the same time. It's probably why I never reached the top, but hey, I had a fucking good time. So like if I can create the same thing for, a lot of people, but also help some people get to the pinnacle of, the sport as well at the same time,
yeah.
like fucking great. So yeah. Um, well, so there was something else I was actually going to ask you. I feel like you've already dropped like loads of this advice already. But I guess for people like yourself, me,
Mm,
other athletes, what's your best advice to them? We've talked about the down stuff already, but you got any more little gems?
I think um, from an operational perspective, I think you should be. I presume most people are doing this that are fitting it around, a lot of other
Thanks.
um, things. Is planning your week out from the Saturday, Sunday beforehand of, do I want to do this 5K row when I've got, 30 minutes after work, or a meeting finishes late, or, that sort of thing. No, I want to be doing that on a Saturday where I've got the time and the space and I can properly, sort of like prep and build for it.
How do you usually like navigate that? Like, are you pretty flexible with switching days around and stuff?
Yeah,
Or do you?
I think because of my gym is big and there's an outdoor space now, which is very positive as well. So I would say I can never not train.
Yeah.
I can always do something, but
Mhm.
yes, I may have an idea of exactly what I want to do as I walk in, and that changes completely, or movements get subbed, or, so like, for example, yesterday's sort of like 4-minute intervals ended up just being bike and ski rather than bike, ski, pull up, because by the time you actually get into it, and I was like, well, I've got about 20 minutes. Is that going to free up in that time? No. Well, you sort of make the most within it. Exactly. That's probably, to be fair, been a learning over the time as well, because I think early on you're a bit like, well, Monday I have to do this so it doesn't interfere with this in Tuesday. And actually, if you're sensible enough about switching it around, what's better is actually doing most of it rather than, letting, perfect get in the way of good, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Could not agree more. Could not agree more. For me, it's like blocking certain bits together. So I'll usually now do like a bit more of a strength session. Then I'll do like maybe the Metcon, which will take like 20 minutes, like CrossFit Tuesday, 20, 30 minutes.
Yeah.
I'll probably have like a 10-minute break, like sort myself out a little bit, and then I'll do like the lower limit of the conditioning, the mixed conditioning from a Monday, just because it's just a bit easier to block it together for me with using a commercial gym.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I was back in over Christmas and New Year. I was back in the one I used to go to for maybe the first 2 years of JST, and sort of thinking back that I used to get so much done there in that space is actually, ridiculous. And the luxury of being at Digbeth at a very good, very spacious gym is something I won't take for granted now, looking back. But yeah, it's, if you've got the space for a bar or a squat rack at time, and actually, in maintenance week, could I back squat and then front squat one after the other because it's maintenance week and it's, 5-3-1 or 3-5? Why not? I'm not saying it's optimal for, Ed, Phil Roy, etc., to be doing that, because there's probably volume and interference things to be taken in mind. But is that really going to interfere with me? Probably not.
Probably
I'll be okay.
not. Is it better to just be consistent and just get it in an efficient way? Most likely, yeah.
Yeah. So I think that sort of flexibility, definitely. And I mean, there's definitely people that are more dedicated and more motivated and will get up an hour earlier to do whatever. But I sort of realize now that unless I'm in that dial up block, it's not worth having an hour less sleep to get an extra 40 minutes of intervals, because as a net position, I just end up being, worse off from that balance by the end of the week. But it took a long time to get to that. It took a long time to accept that. And then I think realize that you've got to think, it's I'd rather be training than not training.
Yeah. I mean, it's probably only really been this last couple of months, like, where it's become super apparent. If there's a day where, like, I can't train because XYZ has happened, like with the 2 kids, or whatever, I just feel way grumpier than if I don't. And it's like one of those where, people say, oh, like, I'll go training and like I feel way better because of it. And it's only become like I say, this last couple of months, very apparent that that is in fact true, like for me. And
it's probably been there the whole time before. It was just that there were times where you were like, I'm absolute performance and nothing else, but you didn't, because you were training that much, you didn't notice that sort of drop off. But because you've been at that absolute, 12 out of 10 lifestyle intensity for periods, I feel like even if you don't get it at 5 out of 10, then you're suddenly like, well, I've really become used to that and rely on that for, what it gives me.
So then, then it's been the case where it's like, right, okay, literally just doing, 20, doing a 30-minute strength session, 30-minute strength session, or just going out for a run is actually better than just not doing anything at all as well.
Exactly. And that's
And
that flexibility. It's, your gym shut over Christmas. What can you do? Can you do EMOM hotel gym? EMOM
yeah,
burpees. And I feel like now, because it's been long enough and you've experienced enough that you can put together. I mean, you can make anything unpleasant in terms of intensity. It can be the
of
easiest
course,
thing in the entire world, but you're right. 20-minute EMOM of something is infinitely better for
yeah,
me for the rest of the day than
yeah,
nothing.
exactly. And it's super easy because it's like, right, which bits of JST Athlete can I just do? I'm going to do that strict press from Tuesday. I need to make sure I get in these front squats. So it's like, right, okay, I'm going to do, EMOM, 5 front squats, second minute strict press, and then third minute's, rest or something else. That's literally how this Christmas has looked for me.
And I
Just
think as long as in the block, for mine, it was back squatting purely. I just
mhm.
wanted to squat more.
Yeah,
It became this absolute non-negotiable of there's certain things that in certain weeks I just don't have, the capacity for it or the time for it. Um, but I squat, every single session for the last 12, 16 weeks because I want to do that. And then in Marbella, got found out handstand push-up capacity. So it became, every single time that came up and that progression. I know there's a 5-minute test coming up, so I would
yeah,
expect that to go up. But it felt like, by sort of focusing on these things of actually, I didn't really want to do that, but probably going to see the biggest
benefit of
gain
doing it.
out of that as well.
Yeah,
But it all comes down to that, actually, is there wall space on the time
of course.
that I'm there and being
Yeah.
a little bit flexible because, at the end of the day, if you do burpee pull-ups or burpee box jump overs for 3 lots of 8,
In the
you're
grand scheme of
going to be
things,
okay.
yeah,
Exactly.
it's not making that much difference. So what comps are you going to do this year? Have you decided or not?
I would like to do Team Sid. I haven't put the
Team
feelers
Sid.
out.
Okay.
If this bit does go anywhere, Michael Farrow join my team for
Yeah.
Team Sid.
Anyone else?
Um,
Any other team picks? Anyone get them in
it
now?
depends. It depends on the split of the team. I think.
Okay.
Um,
For Sid, it'll be 2 and 2. It's got to be 2 and 2.
I think finding people willing to do intermediate female is the
Okay.
challenge because people are either want to do scaled or are genuinely too good and have made that
Okay.
that sort of jump up. Um,
So we need to give a
Eric,
shout out.
if Eric's about as well, actually,
Eric Gilvray. Okay.
great guy.
Right. So we just need to put the bat signal out for the intermediate females out there.
Yeah, I think they're all RX. They're all
Okay.
RX or above.
They're all RX,
Um,
or they're all scaled. They're not in between.
I think it's the hardest teammates to find
Okay.
in my theory. It's why Marbella was always good because it was 3-1
Yes.
at
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
intermediate. I think because
Yeah.
of the worm weight, that made
Uh,
it slightly easier to put teams together. But I mean, as soon as you put something out on the group chat, you're right. Someone that you don't know will pop up and be keen. It's just
figuring out who.
getting it done.
Mate, check
Um,
check out those leaderboards. Check out those leaderboards, and
you have to
you know.
scroll too high up for my own name to find these people. It just gets boring getting up there.
I'll be your scout. I'll be yeah. I'll start attending some matches and yeah. But yeah,
Uh,
Sid team. Any
yeah, that'll be
more?
good. I'll probably do.
An indie. You got an indie one?
Do you know what? I haven't done one now. I didn't do all of last year. I feel like I
Okay.
probably should do one at some point, but I don't
Dip
love
your toe back in one.
qualifiers.
Okay. So you need a direct entry is what you
And
need.
you know what? Something local that's not going to be peppered with people snatching
Sergeant Pepper.
130 in, whatever division it needs to be.
Yeah.
Maybe Sid individual. Sid individual could also work. I thought that was scaled Sid was a nice level. I did think intermediate Sid
Okay.
from the last couple of years was quite a
It's
punchy
pretty good.
level for
Okay.
people.
Maybe
Um,
maybe Graft, maybe the Ragnarok, if and when they drop this date, maybe that's the one because that's Coventry. It's not
that
too
would be
far.
ideal as well. That would be pretty
So
good. Yeah, one of
okay.
them. I think I'd say maybe 3 this year.
Okay.
I think I'm, you know,
Do
aging
you,
out of
do you know what else
15 comps a year.
looks really good? Direct entry.
Well,
District L. I think District L looked really, really good this year.
Is that the sort of
It's the
you're
outdoorsy one in
outside
the
in
lakes.
that's fun. I like that.
It looked really fun.
Did
Get
Ed
on your
come Ed
paddleboard,
come
mate.
second in that one?
He came second behind Pete and his team. I know, yeah.
They're ones to watch for Team Sid.
Yes.
Tell you,
Yeah,
Tom
yeah.
Owen, Rampage.
Rampage is on it, isn't it? Oh,
It's
Tom.
that consistency. It's
It,
you do it over the years and you're creeping up.
I had when was it? I think it was before, it was in the lead up to Marbella. I had a word with him. I was like, right, because me and Pete had been chatting, and it was a little bit off the boil at this point. And I said to
Mm,
Tom, I was like, right, Tom, you need to take this team by the scruff of the neck. So when you're in the gym, SA1, tell people or set times every week that you're going to train together. And CrossFit Tuesday, they're going head to head, him, Claudia, Pete, a few
yeah.
other people, like on a weekly basis. And I feel like just by setting that time where it's a bit of an anchor point to be like, right, I've got to show up here and I've really got to, dial in that intensity because I feel like with Tom, that's where he particularly struggled as well, is like that extra gear of intensity. But when you've got a group of people, it's a little bit easier to find
Yeah,
sometimes.
I think that's fair.
Um, So yeah, and from that point, I said, just be the leader of that group. Just sort that out. And if you take it by the scruff of the neck, it's then going to benefit you, even though you've had to go about, organizing it a little bit more. So
And it
yeah, that's
did.
been really good. It's been really good to see. Yeah, it's been really good to see,
Yeah,
to be
because they
honest.
dominated that. It was yeah. I remember someone saying, "Oh, you should be an elite next year," and I feel like on paper you would have said that's a strong RX team, or
Yeah, it
there's some
is.
good RX athletes in there, but actually they should be an elite next year,
Yeah, they should.
which
You
is
won RX, move up, move
yeah.
up, baby. There's some fucking good teams in that elite category though. I remember there's the Danish team that was at semi-finals that qualified for the games. They did it this year. Um,
They did all of the worm movements with three people in the final that we were watching because one of the females pulled a hamstring on the
right,
sandbag
okay,
one previous.
okay,
So they did lunges with her just like one hand on the worm. It
right,
was
okay.
I mean, to be fair, the bloke at the front was fucking massive, like Thor. Um, but yeah, that was it was
Yeah,
impressive to watch. But who
yeah,
won? Ryan won, so
it's
take
true.
that.
There you go. Words that you live by.
Oh, this is good. I had to think about this as well because I do love a saying that's not too cringy
Okay.
or too, ick inducing.
Mm.
And I've decided that the best one for all categories is 1% better every day
1%
because
better every day.
I think it's achievable. I think it's manageable. I think it speaks to this process and that,
Yeah.
that sort of compound interest that you can generate and it will add up over time if you're consistent enough about it. And I think also it can apply to pretty much everything as well. It
Right.
doesn't just have to be, pure gym. I think as long as you're getting better at, all things, then things are moving in the right direction.
It's funny you said that actually, because I feel like it's on a bit of a sliding scale that as well. Because some people, 1% for us will look way different to like a Phil Roy and Ed,
Yeah.
and I feel like that's really important to understand as well. So it's picking and choosing your 1%s. But yeah, Mr. Stephen Bartlett he's been 1% in the every day recently, hasn't he? Have you
I saw
been?
him. He gets like he was in some trouble about Huel, but
Uh,
I could have predicted that. Unless this episode is sponsored by Huel, in which case, by Huel,
I had this episode sponsored by LFSIT.
love to. That's to be honest, that is something that has not been 1% better every day. That's been very much back burner since I started a new job. But something will happen. Something will happen
Yeah,
this year when I have some creative inspiration. But if I don't, I'm not going to do anything with it.
no, not been mad. But yeah, 1% every day, one
I
inch
think it's a
better.
good one.
Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. And you're right. It does. It completely. It does add up.
it does.
And
37.
also,
Go
I
on.
think further up you go, it is a couple of seconds here or there, or
It is.
it's all that
It
sort of
is.
stuff, isn't it?
It sure is. Well, thank you very much for your time, Max.
Pleasure. Pleasure
It's
as
been an
always.
absolute pleasure.
Hopefully see you next week.
Oh yes, sir. CrossFit Wigan.
I've never been, but it looks like a big old spot.
Do you know what? It's not that big.
Isn't it?
When we compare it to a train or something like that,
Our
you know
train
what I
is
mean?
massive, to be fair.
I'd say it's a moderate sized gym. So the atmosphere will be cooking.
Always better in the north.
Always better in the north. You're not wrong. You
Always.
know, there's just something about northern people. I
I got
shouldn't really
banned
say
from that
this.
playlist in the gym. Actually, it's been renamed, hasn't it, to Hard Tech, which I don't like because Dakadak was much better. But yeah, I can only play that when I'm on my own now, which is still hits, but sad state of affairs that the classes didn't want to listen to it during.
Are we talking about Dakadak? Yeah, yeah. Um, it's a shame that. It's a big shame.
It is a shame. It is a shame because it's so good.
But it's probably one of those era things. We'll be listening to it in 10 years' time, being like, oh, listen to this, son. You know what I mean?
You'll
Yeah.
come on somewhere and you'll be transported back to maxing out in a cave in Denmark or wherever it was where it all originated from.
We'll be in a Danish nightclub on someone else's stag do. Klopfgeister comes on and then it's all going off.
Amazing.
Yeah. Right, mate. I'll catch you soon.
I'll speak soon.
Pleasure.
Pleasure. Thanks a lot, mate.